According to YouTube, this is my 200th video. 200! So I've decided to give you something special. Now I know what you're thinking, didn't you already do something special with that Ferrari F40 video earlier this week? No, I mean something really special. Something that is both rarer than the Ferrari F40 and more powerful. It's this, a Mercedes R63 AMG, a 500 horsepower minivan, and the rarest modern AMG car in existence. I've borrowed this R63 AMG from a viewer here in Philadelphia, and today I'm going to give you a tour of it and show you what life is like with a 500 horsepower minivan. Then I'm going to take it out on the road and find out how the R63 drives, and then, of course, I'm going to give it a Doug score. Click the link below to go to autotrader.com/oversteer for more of my thoughts on the R63 and for a list of other ultra rare modern cars you probably don't even know about that are currently listed for sale on AutoTrader. I say ultra rare because that's exactly what the R63 AMG is. Earlier this week, my F40 video, you probably thought that was ultra rare, but in terms of production numbers, the R63 makes the F40 look like a Camry. Ferrari built 1,300 F40s over its 5-year production run. In terms of the R63, exact numbers differ, but most reports say they built less than 200 of these for the entire world, and fewer than 100 of those were sold in the United States in one single model year, 2007. That makes this car rarer than the Ferrari Enzo, the LaFerrari, McLaren P1, the Porsche 918 Spider. So why is it so rare? Well, you can probably guess not that many people were looking for a 500 horsepower minivan, especially when you consider that the original base price of this thing 10 years ago was $88,400 with shipping before options. This one cost over $110,000 new for a minivan. But it isn't just any minivan. We'll start the tour with the biggest question you probably have, which is this thing really a 500 horsepower minivan? I'll break that down. Yes, it does have 500 horsepower, courtesy of AMG's 6.2 liter V8, which makes 503 horsepower and 465 pound-feet of torque. It's a monster, and it's enough to send the R63 AMG and 6 comfortable adult individuals from 0 to 60 in 4.4 seconds. That's quicker than a new STI. But is it a minivan? Well, a quick glance at the styling says yes, of course. Here's a look at a typical minivan, and here's a look at a typical SUV. The R63 clearly shares its lines with a minivan. Now, a lot of people say, well, it has 4 opening doors, so it can't really be a minivan. But don't forget that the original Honda Odyssey also had 4 opening doors, and it's like the minivan. Some people say, well, it has all-wheel drive, so it can't be a minivan, but the Toyota Sienna has all-wheel drive, and it's like the other minivan. Mercedes, for their part, couldn't bring themselves to call it a minivan, but they also didn't call it an SUV. Instead, they referred to the R-Class as a Grand Sports Tourer. I have no idea what that means, but I bet they paid some marketing guy a lot of money to come up with it. Anyway, on to the tour. Let's talk about one of the R63's best traits, practicality. You know how I always complain about getting into the back seats of exotic cars? Well, this is just about the most exotic of them all, and getting in is easy. Watch this, just pull a little lever, the seat goes forward, and boom, you're in, and I can just climb right in. And here's the cool part, when the seat is actually back, I have a reasonable amount of room back here. I can actually sit here. This has to be the most practical 500 horsepower car in existence. Continuing with the practicality theme, let's talk about the rear, starting with the cargo area. It's impressive how much cargo space this thing has behind the third row of seats. In most 3-row cars like this, you usually have to put the third row down if you want to load anything into the back. Not in this one. There's a surprising amount of space back here. But if you do want to put more stuff in the back, dropping the third row of seats is easy. You just pull this little latch, push the seat forward, and then boom, it's down. You want to do the other side? Same deal. It's easy. Look how simple that is. Practical, easy. In a 500 horsepower AMG car. And of course, lifting them back up is just as easy. Just pull on this little loop, comes up, pull this thing. That's all you gotta do. Now, when you get back here, you don't feel like you've been banished to the rear, like it's punishment to be back here, like it is in some 3-row vehicles. There are some benefits to being in the back of this car. One of them is a legroom, which I already mentioned, pretty good. There's also, each seat has its own climate control vent, which is cool. But then there's my personal favorite feature you probably never knew the R-Class had. The rear side windows open. They open a little bit just to give you a little bit of airflow and let you listen to a little bit of that 6.2 liter V8 exhaust note. The interesting thing about the rear side windows is that even though they are automatic, there's no button back here to control them. Instead, if you're sitting in back and you want your windows open, you have to ask the driver nicely, would you please open my vented windows, Mr. Driver? But while the third row is nice, the real place to be in this car is the middle row as you get driven along in 150 mile an hour comfort. And yes, this car will do 150 miles an hour. The middle row not only has beautiful leather-lined individual captain's chairs, feel incredibly comfortable, but it also has a ton of legroom. And in this particular one, it has rear seat entertainment screens for each seat and old school remotes to control them, of course. It also has heated rear seats. Why wouldn't it? And it has a climate zone specifically for the rear so that you can change and adjust your climate control as you wish. There's even 4 climate control vents back here. Then again, I would expect all this stuff for $110,000. Of course, the R63 is also fitted with a slew of other very helpful family car features. For example, in the back here, there is a nice power tailgate. Just pull it and it opens right up so you can easily get in back. There's also a giant sunroof that covers basically the entire car. You can close it with a shade if you want so it doesn't let any light in, or you can open the front part and have a huge sunroof. There's also keyless go, which means that you can keep the key in your pocket, walk up to the car, open the door, and press the starter to start it. That one's pretty normal. And there's even radar cruise control. This car is 10 years old, but it has radar cruise control. It'll adjust the following distance automatically based on the car in front of you. Now, I know some of you are going to be watching this and saying, well, my mom's Honda Odyssey has that. My mom's Sienna has a big sunroof and vented windows in back. Fine, I get it. But here are a couple things about the R63 that your mom's Odyssey doesn't have. For example, in front, the brakes are 15.4 inches in diameter. You will never find a minivan with 15.4 inch front brakes. The owner told me he went to get snow tires, 19-inch wheels, and they wouldn't fit over the brakes. Ha! Think about that in a minivan. Another thing the R63 has that your regular family minivan doesn't, this car has a sport mode for the suspension. You put it in sport mode and it lowers itself and tightens up for better handling, so you can take this thing to the track if you want to. There's also a sport mode for the powertrain. Push that and the shifting tightens up, the throttle response improves for better acceleration. You will not find that in your Nissan Quest. Another R63 party trick you won't find in your regular family minivan, this thing has air suspension, which means that you can raise it up if you're on a rough road and you need a little bit more ground clearance, or you can lower it to ease entry and exit and getting stuff in the back. But the thing that really makes the air suspension cool is the fact that it self-levels, which means that if you have a bunch of people in the car and you have a bunch of stuff in the back, it doesn't look like one of those minivans you see on the highway where it's squatting down and back. Instead, it just stays perfectly level. That's the benefit of air suspension until it breaks. But the air suspension certainly isn't broken in this one. A fact that you can tell as soon as this car is turned off because it automatically lowers itself when you turn off the ignition, and you can hear it. Listen to this. One of the other things I truly love about the R63 is just how subtle it is. Nobody else on the road has any idea what this car is or what it's capable of, and in fact, there are only 3 ways you can tell apart an R63 from just a regular everyday R-Class. So one is the wheels, which are larger than a standard R-Class. Another is the taillights in back, which are tinted a little bit more, and the final one are those AMG quad exhausts. That's it, that's all. That's the only way, aside from the badging, that you'd ever know you're about to be smoked by a minivan. Of course, there is one more way you can tell the R63 apart from a standard R-Class if you happen upon one on the road. That would be the exhaust. That's a minivan. And so the R63 AMG is amazingly rare and really powerful and a bit funky and surprisingly well equipped. And now it's time to get it out on the road. I have only ever seen 2 of these in my entire life, and I can't wait to drive this one. I can't believe how bolstered these seats are. It's like I'm sitting in sport seats and then I look in the back and I got 3 rows. Inside it's nice and quiet. And comfortable, just as you'd expect a high-end Mercedes to be. I mean, ultimately this was a $100,000 car only 10 years ago, so it better be pretty nice. You have this expansive view because this raked windshield. God, this thing is so crazy. And yet, as I'm sitting in it, it's not that crazy, and that's kind of the charm of this car. It's a practical, usable car that just happens to be one of the single rarest cars that has been made in the last 20 years. It's so funny that I'm driving basically a minivan with sport mode for the transmission and sport mode for the suspension. You do not have this in a Honda Odyssey. As we sit here at the stoplight, it's nice and comfortable and quiet, and you wouldn't really know that you're in something insane with more horsepower than a Ferrari F430 unless you really get on it, which is kind of the point. I mean, this is sort of the all-purpose car in that sense. All right, I'm accelerating a little. That's about half throttle, and those cars are just going behind us. The thing is, it's not as fast as a Huracan, you know, some of the other cars I do, but it's just what it is that's accelerating at that speed. That is the crazy thing. That's what's so funny. And that guy's got a fake M5. I suspect he wouldn't like to race us. Of course, if we actually got up next to a real M5, it would probably be a pretty tight race. There's the guy with the 911. That's funny almost. I mean, we have 200 more horsepower than that car. Faster in every measurable respect except for top speed, but only because this car is limited. All right, we're gonna goose it a little bit. It's just amazing. I mean, the really incredible thing with this engine has always been how much mid-range power it has. It's great from a stop, but it just has so much torque that when you drop the throttle, you can just go and go and go and go. And that was always the benefit of this big 6.2 liter V8. The thing is, we're probably getting 7 miles per gallon every time I floor it, but it's just hilarious to do that. And you hear the sound, and the craziest thing to me is looking behind and seeing how just vast the rest of the car is. I also just take pride in knowing that I have the rarest car on the road. I mean, there is a chance that we have the rarest car on the road in all of the state today driving around. Who has a car that's rarer than one of maybe 50 in the whole country? Nobody! This thing makes the E63 wagon look common, or the GL63, any of that stuff. It also was just loaded with stuff because it was so expensive. Even though it's 10 years old, it's so expensive. It has nav, but it also has power tailgate. It has radar cruise control. It just beeped at me when I got too close to a truck because it tells you if you're about to hit something. This thing is loaded, and it's got 500 horsepower, and it's got all-wheel drive. I mean, this is like a dream car for a family that needs to go fast. I can't believe how fast it is. I've got the seat bolster in the most comfortable position, and it still feels pretty huggy. It's like they installed these sports seats so that you could go around corners in this thing. Yes, this is a family car. The owner of this car has 2 kids, and he uses it. In fact, his wife drives it mostly as a family minivan. That's another thing about the R63. Mercedes didn't even bother to advertise this car. You had to sort of just know that it existed and go to the dealer and order it. They didn't want to spend any money marketing it because they knew that the potential buyer pool was going to be so small. I mean, and that's really the thing of it. It's just the rarest, coolest, most special, exciting. I mean, I've done a lot of cars, and you get in a Lamborghini, and it's a Lamborghini, and it's cool, but you go to a Cars and Coffee, and there's 5 Lamborghinis. You will never see this at a Cars and Coffee. In fact, you will never see this. And if I saw one of these on the road, I would lose it. I would honk and come up to the owner, and I would be that guy. Yeah, I haven't seen one of these. Last time I saw one of these 2 years ago, I was on the San Francisco Bay Bridge, and one passed me, and I still remember that. 2 years later, I still remember that, whereas when you see a Ferrari 458, it's like, oh cool, 458, maybe you text to your friend, oh, I just saw, and that's it, you then forget. Yeah, and now we're driving down the left lane of the interstate here, and it feels like a business jet. Like it's perfectly comfortable, we're moving along faster than everybody else. Nobody really knows, but I feel like this thing belongs in the left lane carrying 5 people going about 120 miles an hour on the Autobahn. That seems like the dream spot for this car. And so that's the Mercedes R63 AMG. It is the rarest modern AMG car. It is the most powerful minivan ever manufactured, and it's one of the most bizarre, unusual, rare, thrilling cars I've ever reviewed. A fitting vehicle for number 200. And now it's time for the Doug score. Starting with the weekend categories and styling, let's be honest, nobody is buying this thing for how it looks. When I posted pictures of it on Instagram, well, people weren't too charitable. Still, it's not that bad, I think. It gets a 4 out of 10. Acceleration, it does 0 to 60 in 4.4 seconds, which is insane, by the way, so it gets a 7 out of 10. Handling is fine, more athletic than a traditional SUV, but too bulky for real precision and excellence. It gets a 5 out of 10. Cool factor is debatable, but this is one where I use my Doug Score executive privilege and give it an 8 out of 10. Yes, I think this minivan is as cool as the Porsche 911R or the Ferrari 430 Scuderia. And if I saw one of these at Cars and Coffee parked next to one of those, I'd probably walk over to this first. Finally, there's importance. As much as I love this car, in the grand scheme of things, it's not tremendously significant. Just a weird side project from AMG. It gets a 6 out of 10, bringing its total weekend score to 30 out of 50. Not bad, but obviously below the sports cars I normally review. Next up are the daily categories. For features and equipment, it's decent with some good new tech, but it's 10 years old, not a match for the latest and greatest. So it gets a 6 out of 10. Luxury measures comfort, and this is certainly comfortable. Still, it has big wheels and slightly too much bolstering in the front seat, so it stops at a 7 out of 10. Quality measures materials and reliability. Materials are good, so it does well there, but reliability is a different story. These don't have many problems, but they do suffer from the dreaded head bolt issue these 6.2-liter V8s had. It could destroy the engine without warning. Very few of these engines were affected, but there's a now famous forum thread on Grassroots Motorsports where one R63 owner had the head bolt failure, and the dealer quoted him over $57,000 for a new engine. So he did the work himself. It's quite incredible. I'll link it in the description below. Anyway, even though that issue is rare, it's enough to lower the quality score down to a 6 out of 10. As for practicality, the R63 offers an amazing 85 cubic feet of cargo space with the seats folded. That earns it a 10 out of 10, and while I'd usually dock a point for its bad gas mileage, the excellent interior space, ease of getting in and out, and the packaging in this car helps it keep the perfect score. Finally, there's value. You're thinking 10-year-old AMG, so it must be cheap, right? Not quite. The average asking price of a 2007 E63 on AutoTrader right now is only 20 grand, but the last R63 sale I can find was on Bring a Trailer late last year, where one with 78,000 miles sold for $51,000. These things command a premium because they're hard to find. So hard to find that the Bring a Trailer R63 I just mentioned was exported to Europe by the person who bought it. So that's one less in the States. With prices like that, value is just a 5 out of 10, bringing the total daily score to 34 out of 50, one shy of the lead. Add it up and the total Doug score is 64 out of 100. Also, take a look at that chart because there won't be a lot of cars that get a 10 in practicality and an 8 in cool factor. In fact, I suspect there will only ever be one.